This presentation will bring back the era of 1948 to 1957 on the Southern Pacific, with trains that were running in the Greater Bay Area. Then we'll make some comparisons to the later years up to 1975. The graceful 484 series Northerns were originally made for the glamorous daylight passenger trains beginning in 1937. Now they were winding down their careers by pulling freight assignments. We'll see lots of great steam power from the Northerns, Mountains, Pacifics, smaller freight locomotives, cab-ahead articulated engines, and even the smaller yard switcher engines. There was a great deal of fan trip activity that was filmed by people that knew the end of steam was looming just ahead in the 1950s. This fan trip has stopped at Castroville on a trip to Monterey. SP dieselized rapidly in the 1950s, but there was lots of steam power that lingered in and near the Bay Area, especially on commuter trains on the San Francisco Peninsula. It was all double-tracked from San Francisco to San Jose with lots of trains to see. Some of the last steam power held these peninsula jobs down until January 1957, but we'll see lots of those trains later on. Most all were retired with many potential and reliable miles that were still left on the table. A favorite locomotive type with SP fans has long been the cab-ahead 4882 type locomotives, more often called cab-forward locomotives. These massive engines were an SP signature design to cope with numerous and very long tunnels on the Donner Pass line. By turning the common steam engine around, the cab and crew are placed ahead of all the engine's exhaust smoke when in tunnels and the numerous snow sheds on Donner Pass. Plus, they really did act like two powerful locomotives, but needing only one engine crew. A youth squeezes his life barely past this AC-12, and the flagman seems to be instructed by the engineer to go chase him down for a safety lesson. So there he goes. Some things are considered unsafe now by railroad management and workers, like walking on top of equipment, especially moving equipment. You will see rail workers hopping on and off moving trains back then, and even passengers were doing this. Things were different in those days. Next is 4443, a GS4 Northern built by Lima Locomotive Works in 1941. Her glamour days pulling the daylight trains appear to be over. She's pulling freight duty here. "4443 was scrapped in 1958, but before that scrapping, she had some remarkable experiences. In preparation for 4443 to be used in a Hollywood movie, she had a full cosmetic makeover. Also, in that time frame, she was put to use on several fan trips. One notable fan trip was from the Oakland Pier to Fresno and back. This shows a vast improvement in her looks. Here, 4443 backs down to her waiting train. The large tanks in the background are full of fuel and part of the SP property here. 4443 was lucky to be used in the 1957 movie Pal Joey as some form of preservation. In the spring of 1957, the Pal Joey train scenes were filmed in the Oakland Pier station shed, the same train shed on the left of the scene here. The fan trip left the Oakland Pier and took the Hayward line to Niles. After running over the Altamont Pass, there was a brief stop before turning compass south on the West Side Line to Fresno, California. There was a lot of East Bay industrial area to see heading to Niles. Once in Niles Canyon, we can appreciate all the beauty it offers. She was one of the last locomotives to be used on fan trip trains in 1957. The red track is the SP line, the green is the Western Pacific line. They crossed back and forth over each other several times in this area. In the next scene at the SP station at Altamont, the passengers get a photo shoot stop. About the only thing remaining up here today on this abandoned SP line is the huge gray metal shed that was for grain storage. It's on the right. Here's a good look at the quality of paint on these daylight passenger cars. Arriving at Tracy, 4443 takes on more water. This overflow of water seemed to be part of the ritual on these type of trips. This must have been a planned scene with the backdrop of a clean and very new SP boxcar. The line from Tracy to Fresno has since been severed, with the track from Los Banos to Firebaugh removed from service. This created two branch lines out of a once complete through line. Normally, firemen take pride in running a clean burning stack, but rail run-by photographers always preferred lots of accommodation with dramatic and sooty smoke. Next will be a few small accommodation stations along the way to Fresno that once supported smaller communities with local freight and even passenger service in these productive agricultural lands. The SP competed with the parallel Santa Fe Railroad here for business. Fresno is a large city in the San Joaquin Valley known for surrounding orchards and row-planted crops. Many packing and cannery plants, as well as supporting equipment dealers, were located here in Fresno. Northern 4460 was used for several fan trips. This one is attracting photo fans in the Niles Canyon. Many of these fans chased these trains, racing up ahead in their autos to get a series of photos and even movie film shots such as these we see here. Here comes a pair down the adjacent county road. This is following the same west side line. SP-4460 is a GS6 built in 1943. She is saved and on display at the St. Louis, Missouri Museum of Transportation. While passengers stretched their legs, 4460 took on water at Tracy before it headed down the west side line. The fans chasing in their cars caught up along Highway 33 and at Patterson, California. This lumberyard is still there over 6 decades later. At Newman, the depot on the left is gone, but the gray concrete footings for the black water tank are still there, where the tracks cross Merced Street. Next we see a P8 Pacific. These were once numerous out here, and for their design era, they were great machines that exceeded design requirements. They were once the mainstay of steam power on the Peninsula commute trains. These Pacifics were popular with railfans on numerous excursions too. In the next chapter, we'll stop in on busy San Jose and see many long-lost forms of classic railroading. San Jose was at the end of the 47-mile line of the Peninsula commute trains running south. This afternoon commute local is beginning its trip back north to San Francisco. It was double track on the entire run to support this commute morning and evening rush in both directions at the same time. It was also a very busy central point for heavy freight traffic, pulled by the likes of this cab forward to locations radiating out of here. The track to the very right was the freight lead. This 482 mountain is pulling train 71, often called the Coast Mail. It will make a stop in San Jose and continue to San Francisco. The baggage cars are filled with sacks of mail and Railway Express packages. There's a rail post office car, and after another baggage car is a dark olive-colored rider coach, followed by an articulated chair car and an old business car named Coast. This is 2479, a P-10 class Pacific. This 1923 built Baldwin Pacific was one of 14 in the P-10 class of heavy Pacific types. It was rebuilt from a 1937 wreck. The 2479 was retired from service in July 1956, but it was spared from being scrapped. It was on static display in a San Jose park for many years and is now under a restoration. These P-10s were a high water mark for their day until the larger 482 Mountain class relegated them to duty of short and fast passenger trains on the peninsula and on the Sacramento locals. Here it runs by with another Mail Express train. This one will turn off the coastline and run through Santa Clara to pass through Newark and then to the pier at the Oakland Mole. Next is an E7 that was originally one of a group of 15 for the Shasta Daylight. They were replaced by the Alco PA units on that train. The Daylight Train 99 has an E7B unit between a leading and trailing Alco PA. The large white building was an Apricot Growers Association plant. All those orchard lands were eventually converted into suburban tract homes. Behind the white building was a huge natural gas storage tank with a silver top that was a common sight long ago. A P8 Pacific backs down to cross over to another track just ahead of a newer GP9 pulling a short commute train. A Northern pulling a single bilevel commute car runs towards San Jose's Cahill Street Station. Train 255 ran from San Jose through Newark to the Oakland Pier. This is Express Mail Train number 255. And again on another day with express refrigerator cars from Railway Express. Many of the cars have the red diamond-shaped logo on the sides. Two others are in a very dirty, faded Great Northern color scheme. A trailing rider coach offered passenger rides that took about an hour and 20 minutes. This was the San Jose Linson Street Roundhouse. Closer to us is the turntable pit. Steam engines needed a way to turn around to run back up to San Francisco. Visible in this scene is a man at the control stand. Here 2453 is creeping onto the turntable. It seems nicely balanced on the table now. Notice the bicycle in the lower left. Even kids had some access to places like this back then. Before 2453 can back down to the San Jose station tracks to hook up to a northbound train, the number boards will need the numbers added to indicate the next assigned train number. This 060 is typical of switchers that worked the San Jose station tracks to organize groups of commute cars, and even some including mail cars, for the return waves of northbound trains while they await the main power, such as 2453 we just saw. This is a 6:30 p.m. northbound commute train after leaving the San Jose passenger boarding area at the station. The following locomotives were bred for passenger service. This is the first engine of the Mountain MT1 class. 28 were built in the early 1920s to bring higher horsepower than the smaller Pacifics could produce. Some of these had the skyline casing added on the top after the daylight trains were established. After 24 MT2s and MT3s, another 21 MT4s were built. Each batch included new improvements. The GS for Golden State Series, best known for these colors, brought more power and a four-wheel trailing truck to support a bigger firebox. The GS4 class was the most numerous with 20, including well-known 4449. In this case, GS stood for Golden State to indicate passenger service. By the 1950s, the Northerns were being replaced by diesels on first-class passenger trains, and the GS4s were transferred to both commute and freight service. Well before the daylight, the GS1 class of 10 in 1930 was for SP subsidiary Texas and New Orleans Railroad. Six GS2s were built in 1937, and they were built by Lima Locomotive Works. After a pair of GS5s, 10 GS6s were built during World War II. Since passenger power was restricted by the War Materials Board, the SP said that the GS stood for General Service, alluding to freight usage, and the order was then allowed. During 1952 and 53, the SP subsidiary, Texas and New Orleans, sent 4 older but still very useful GS1s to the Bay Area to work out their remaining years. In 1952, SP subsidiary the Cotton Belt sent 7 of these Northerns to the SP. They were designated as GS7s. All were scrapped by 1957. This is where many locomotives waited in ready lines after being serviced for commute operations. While the SP was busy converting to diesel power, they moved lots of steam power to this region. These machines all had lots of life left, but the clock for any steam power was running down for the SP. These locomotives were near the end of their days, lined up here on the commute ready line, but they still seemed spotless in appearance. SP knew that eliminating all the special infrastructure to support steam operation would financially make up for their early retirement. Railfans knew that they had better charter some steam excursions while it was still possible. This P8 Pacific is being prepared for a typical excursion. There was no real money in this commute operation, and management knew that, but this was really their public face in a region with prominent manufacturing and finance resources. Management made it clear that the equipment had to be clean and dependable, and from things I heard, talking to people that were involved, the workers that made that happen took it to a higher level than expected, having pride in their work. We can follow some of the steps to ready a Pacific for a special fan trip. After some inspection work, 2475 backs out of the Roundhouse onto the turntable. A guy wearing a vest shows up, likely a supervisor of some type. I'm certain the man standing closest to us is a rail fan. Now it's time for fuel and the oil boom on the left. Next, the water hatch is opened, and they always seem to fill it to overflowing with lots of water spilling down the sides. Sort of a ritual to make sure it's really full. Yep, it's full now. The 2475 backs down the track. Now 2475 rolls past the giant natural gas reservoir to the San Jose Cahill Street station, where the train is awaiting its arrival for hookup. The 2475 was involved in a number of memorable fan trips, and she seems to have some extra touches not normally seen, such as the white painted wheels and running boards. Now we're off and running. After leaving San Jose, we take the Wise East leg. We see the train cross over Santa Clara Street. Long ago, the electric Peninsular Railway crossed under this overpass. About 15 miles from the San Jose Yard is Irvington. At one time, Irvington had a small SP depot, but the structure was sold off to become a lumber dealer's building. The SP line in red races closely alongside the Niles to San Jose Western Pacific branch line. While this train runs toward Niles Junction, we'll see that relationship better. Just to the south of SP's Oakland Mole Yard is the smaller Western Pacific Yard in green. Both the red SP and the green WP lines ran in parallel down to Niles Junction. The WP line in green ran from their yard down the middle of 3rd Street to where we are now standing in front of the WP station. This is while a WP fan trip train is approaching. The 482 Mountain was one of 10 Alco-built locomotives sold used to the WP. This excursion will run up through Niles Canyon and Altamont Pass, where the SP and WP tracks ran next to each other. This is passing by the Niles passenger station on the WP line. Next, we cross over the SP's line down to San Jose to see the old interlocking tower. Running through Niles Canyon, we find 2 tunnels. The SP was the first railroad through here by 1870, so they got the best path without needing tunnels. Even so, the SP had a lot of curves, bridges, and retaining walls to make it work. The second line through here, built by WP, was even more work, with crews experiencing difficulty finishing the line that finally got trains into Oakland. WP became the second line into Oakland, which suggests that they didn't have the best of alignment choices here. So after an easier time of it running through Pleasanton and Livermore, the excursion gave way to several stops to allow for some dramatic and smoky run-bys for the fans with cameras. So we'll end the WP ride here at Redmond Cut in Altamont Pass and return to Niles and pick up on the SP 2475 excursion train we left back on the Milpitas line at Irvington. This is the SP Niles station, and this is looking to the east. Here's how the SP and WP tracks in Niles related to each other, straddling Alameda Creek, with both heading off to Niles Canyon by their separate tracks. This excursion was about to run through SP territory that had no regular passenger service here for decades, just freight. SP's line through here was first built by an upstart road named Western Pacific Railroad. It was never finished, but it was bought by what would become the Southern Pacific that we come to know. So the Western Pacific line is the second Western Pacific line through here. We'll follow this line now. After Niles Canyon, we pick the train back up in what looks like Livermore, known for the Lawrence Livermore Radiation Laboratory. This SP line was abandoned, and the only section left is operated by the Niles Canyon Railway from Niles to Sunol. The remaining old WP line is intact and used for the contemporary Altamont Corridor Express commuter trains between San Jose and Stockton, California. You can just make out the paralleling WP track behind the grain storage building. We have reached the SP location with the depot. There was a sizable railroad community up here. When we pass by a number of structures that housed workers, we'll see a small black water tower that was for employee drinking water here. The accommodations varied with seniority, and probably how many children were a factor. After Altamont Pass, the trip finally reached Tracy, that was a regional hub for the SP. You wouldn't see much left if visiting here today, just a little bit of remaining track. While 2475 was being serviced and turned around, the passengers got to mill around for a bit and stretch their legs before the return trip home. Niles once had a turntable, a roundhouse, and all the elements to service steam power. This man is on top of a tender refilling the water tank. After 2475 was serviced, it ran back to its train. When the switch was thrown, it ran back to its waiting train to continue the fan trip. Let's take a long look at the SP traffic on the peninsula long ago. The SP ran commuter trains, known locally as the commutes, that ran between the north tip of San Francisco's peninsula down to San Jose, until finally selling it off to the Joint Powers Board in the 1980s. It was almost 47 miles long, with fast running, and during peak hours trains were spaced with only a few minutes of separation. This is the old San Francisco station, with its large and complex yard to store and accommodate the busy train schedule. The 3rd and Townsend station was close to the ferry building and the old Trans-Bay Terminal that brought electric trains from the lower deck of the Bay Bridge into a large terminal. Here in the mid-1950s, a 462 Pacific, built in the 1920s, backs into a string of bi-level coaches in preparation for a run. The train number indicator boards don't have the train number posted yet. That task was generally left to the firemen. A train beginning its run down to San Jose is pulled by a 462 Pacific. These were fast locomotives if they weren't burdened with overly heavy trains. Commute train numbers were even for trains running compass south, and odd numbers for trains running compass north. This train pulling in has a railway post office car as the first car. Mail was handled on this peninsula run on some trains. It looks like this is a photo day for a fan club. Notice how people were largely allowed to mill around here. They were responsible for their own well-being in those days. This is a bit south where the old Crosley television factory was located back when nearly all the TVs were made in the U.S. This is a fan trip extra train. Our first commute train is at Bayshore. This was all landfill to reroute some of the main line that originally went through Daly City. It was a massive project completed by 1907 that gave a better mainline route and double tracking, plus a large freight yard was here as well. Diesels had replaced all the steam by 1958, giving a new look. This is the trackside view of the original station, built in 1915. The old station and the covered platforms will all be torn down by 1975. These views were taken from above on the 6th Street ramp when the 3rd and Townsend station was still there, but the new 4th and Townsend station construction seems almost complete. The end of the long-distance passenger trains accommodated here came in 1971. Only the shorter commute trains would continue. The old interlocking tower is gone and a replacement tower is now in place. These old Harriman-style suburban coaches were kept clean inside, and many had better exterior paint than these examples. But by the mid-1950s, they lost their appeal to someone commuting in a nice suit and sporting a stylish briefcase. SP had Pullman supply 10 bi-level cars in 1955. By 1957, SP had ACF build 21 of their version. This car was an ACF, or American Car and Foundry, built car. These gallery bi-level cars had upper and lower seating, and they were longer than the old 1920s cars. 10 years after the first bi-level cars, we find a train with mixed, standard, and taller bi-level cars. We see a commuter in a nice suit and a briefcase, the very rider they wanted to please. We'll take a journey south, starting here. Notice the giant natural gas tank above the tunnel to the left. A little further, and we find a long, tall berm at Quint Street, an area with mixed industries. A GP9 has bi-level cars painted in the Lark passenger train two-tone gray colors. Unlike the old suburban cars with windows that could be opened, these bi-level cars had air conditioning since the windows were sealed shut. This is the face of the Fairbanks Morris Trainmaster. They were unusual and perfectly suited for this job that required lots of horsepower and that could build train speed very quickly. The left of the screen reveals that giant natural gas tank we saw over Tunnel Number 2's portal. Another Trainmaster-powered train heads toward Tunnel Number 3. This Fairbanks Morris switcher is following into Tunnel Number 3. This train number 130 just popped out of Number 3's south portal. This is about 5:10 p.m., the rush hour. To the left is a siding at Macy's department store warehouse. Around the bend is Paul Avenue with the station stop. It's not much more than a rain shelter. The south portal of Tunnel Number 4 brings Bayshore. Bayshore was all built on a massive landfill project that projected into the San Francisco Bay to give SP trains a shorter run with double tracks. The yard here included an interlocking tower of standard SP design. There was a time when this body of water wasn't a lagoon, it was just a cove of the actual San Francisco Bay. The causeway built for the 101 freeway created this lagoon. This 1955 scene was shot before the causeway for the 101 freeway was built by 1957. We will see the sequence of commute trains in order up to Train 140, heading into the old Tunnel 5. Some of these scenes are during the causeway building. You can see piles of new ties and some land clearing back where the line poles are on the screen. This was to straighten the curve in the SP tracks and eliminate Tunnel 5. Train 134 has 10 coaches. It left 3rd and Townsend at 5:20 p.m. and will end up in San Jose at 6:25 p.m. It skips all the stops until Redwood City on the way. Train 136 left 3rd and Townsend at 5:23 p.m. with only 3 minutes headway. Its first stop was at Hillsdale on its way to San Jose. In these earlier scenes of August 1956, the causeway is visible as fill dirt ready for pavement. The 101's causeway would be opened by July 1957. Here we see trains arcing their way towards South San Francisco. These scenes were filmed standing on top of Tunnel 5's portal. This area was once a wealth of industrial businesses, including steel production. The 3 high-voltage transmission towers and the railroad signal bridge across the track are still here, but most everything else looks nothing like in these scenes. So far, all the station stops only existed after the Bayshore Cutoff was created. Train 138 in this era would be at South San Francisco at 4:40 p.m. It would arrive in San Jose by 5:46 p.m. This is the San Bruno station. It was for SP trains, and it once had another pair of tracks nearby that brought a connection to the Muni system streetcar line that also ran through Daly City, basically paralleling the original SP line through Daly City. Technically, it was an interurban line. It was folded into the Muni system from the Market Street Railway merger in 1944. Here are a few scenes of the old double-track Muni 40 line. This is the Muni 40 line station stop and its traffic control tower. Behind the black flatbed truck is the SP station and its tracks. Nearby was a power substation for the 40 line. Now you can see why a crossing guard mans this small tower and the crossing gates. This old iron monster is a 2-man car with rear entry and a conductor visible to take your fare. The last 40 line Muni stop was at San Mateo behind the SP station. A loop headed the car back to return to San Francisco. This aging and worn 20-mile-long Muni service ended in 1949. In Millbrae, we have an FM trainmaster in the final color scheme introduced in 1958 for all passenger and freight diesels, also including switchers. The 16 trainmasters were delivered to SP by 1954. The original colors SP used then was black with orange, red, and silver accents, like this unit. These locomotives had built-in steam generators and large high-mounted train number boards with the full SP light package, including the oscillating Mars light and a 5-chime horn. Next is Broadway back in the steam era. Today, these structures are commercial businesses. Trains like the Del Monte to Monterey benefited from the dual control cabs on many GP9s used in passenger service. They didn't need to be turned around on a Y or turntable for the return trip. The lead GP9 diesel, 5623, was one of 22 used in passenger service. It was built with dual controlled cabs. The second unit was not. Notice the air tanks moved to the rooftop. This steam locomotive is handling an impressive number of old heavyweight cars without help. Only the diesel FM train masters could compete at this level. GP9 5623 again. This is the returning Del Monte, or perhaps a railfan extra. Next we have the city of San Mateo. This station was built by 1925. 2 stations existed before this one, and a new one replaced the 1925 version after 1975. This southbound train has an FM trainmaster in charge of a railway postal car and 5 chair cars, all built in the late 1920s. It is very possible that this GS7 Northern ran by San Mateo on the same day. It was on the same spool of Kodak Movie Film. These little film packs were only about 3 to 4 minutes long each. A freight train runs by a prominent water plug for refilling steam engine tenders if needed. The station has a manned road crossing Flagman's Hut. Lots of boxed express freight is waiting for the next train that can handle baggage. This is train 128. It left 3rd and Townsend at 4:50 p.m. and it skips by this station at around 5:15 p.m. Hayward Park had a very modest station. 2 more trains skip by Hayward Park. Minimal stations like this did have trains stop in the time periods of off-peak hours. Examining the old timetables indicates that non-rush hour or midday trains stopped at every station. Flash forward into 1970 and a FM trainmaster runs by, also without stopping. Next is a 1967 built SDP-45 that is pulling a very abbreviated Coast Daylight before Amtrak relieved SP of this function. Romac is just a siding before we reach Hillsdale. The once famous Bay Meadows horse racing track was on the SP east side of the tracks, opposite the Hillsdale station. At times during the 1950s, the track at Bay Meadows even featured dirt track auto racing. The track was torn out by 2008. Now we'll skip down to Redwood City, where there was another interlocking tower. There, a branch off to an industrial area is still in use today. The other line near the Redwood Tower was the track to use the Dumbarton Railroad Bridge to Newark. This is the Redwood Tower. It was built to a common SP plan. This looks like the operator's view looking compass north. This is the sound of an FM trainmaster. Their actual model number was H-24-66 to indicate horsepower in hundreds and 6 powered axles. They had 112,000 pounds of tractive effort. With stops every couple miles, for 47 miles, the only way to keep a reasonable schedule was to possess very rapid acceleration when restarting. That was the amazing thing the trainmaster could offer. That unusual diesel engine was adapted from Fairbanks Morse diesels used in U.S. Navy-powered submarines during World War II. It had 24 pistons in an inline 12-cylinder block, with an upper and lower crankshaft synchronized together. That explains the somewhat too tall profile and the unusual exhaust sound. For its day, it was unequaled as a single unit. It had a supercharger like all diesels at that time, but no turbocharger to make the 2400 horsepower. That was remarkable in that era. Brisk acceleration and more horsepower than the GP9s or most any other road switcher style diesel in the 1953 time frame. All 16 of these were captive to the Peninsula commute service until they were all eliminated by 1975 and replaced by EMD SDP-45s and a few GP-40Ps. The GP9s were retained, but for long trains in rush hour, they were usually run in pairs to equal the trainmasters. Now we return to the tower. A track to the Dumbarton Railroad Bridge curves off to the left on the other side of the overpass. This train just crossed over the Dumbarton Railroad Bridge to approach the Redwood Tower. This is a distant view of the rail bridge with a fan trip train. You can see the swing bridge with the white structure on the top. The bridge and rails connecting Redwood to Newark was in operation by 1910. It was heavily damaged by a fire in 1998 and someday may be repaired or rebuilt for commuter trains to Fremont. we return to the 47-mile Peninsula line at Palo Alto. To the right of the bridge over the creek is a tall coastal redwood tree. It's the tree noted by Gaspar de Portola in his 1769 expedition in much of California. Palo Alto means a tall tree in Spanish. The tree had actually become smaller over the years due to a chronic health problem. There were two prior stations here. This one was opened in 1890. The twin conical roofs are a large home behind the station. It soon turned out to be inadequate. The second station was known for its 5 front arches. By 1939, plans unfolded to improve the track alignment and to run auto roads under the somewhat elevated track. Fewer at-track level road crossings made for better safety, and auto traffic was no longer affected by long trains stopped at the station. And this new station was started in 1940. You can make out the Portola tall tree in the background here. The station is still in use today for Caltrain and bus service. A GP9 comes to a stop in the original colors referred to as the Black Widow paint scheme by some. These coaches have the Lark two-tone gray with white stripes paint scheme. The mail train has a variety of mail baggage cars and a pair of rider coaches on the end, here in Palo Alto. In 1971, Amtrak rescued the passenger Coast Daylight that left the peninsula to originate in Oakland, California, running through Newark and then through San Jose. Here is an early 1970s Amtrak train on that same new alignment near Newark. When Amtrak returned the 10 SDP-45s to the SP, it allowed retirement of the FM train masters. This is where that same line cuts into the peninsula's line to San Jose via Santa Clara. And another new Amtrak-era Coast Daylight, still using a Southern Pacific SDP-45, heads into San Jose for a station stop. Here a Coast Daylight train passes through San Jose, heading to Los Angeles during a track realignment. Amtrak relieved SP of the passenger burden in exchange for enough equipment to support the passenger service, but the SDP-45 locomotives were not part of that permanent arrangement. On another day, we picked the Daylight up just south of San Jose. This is a mostly all-developed area now. The SP had passenger service to Los Gatos on the Vasona branch until 1959. In 1907, the cutoff track was installed from Mayfield to what became Vasona Junction. Another line was part of the SP commuter train route from Vasona to San Jose. The dashed lines once went all the way to Santa Cruz through some very wild country until removed in 1940. Our concern here is the traffic to and from the town of Los Gatos. But first we'll go back to Mayfield around California Avenue. From the junction, this train is heading for Los Gatos. This is train 132 nearing Los Altos station that's nearly covered in ivy in this view. Next up is Loyola with train 168 behind 2477, a P7 class 462 Pacific. This is Vasona Junction with a freight train waiting as the switch is thrown for its movement. This region had numerous orchards and a number of fruit packing sheds and canneries that generated freight traffic. This is train 132 behind Pacific 2476. A view out of the back of the last car gives a view of the rear marker on top of the rear scissors gate. This is a nice view of the seating. Now we are at the end of the Los Gatos line. The siding was to allow the locomotive to back around to the rear of the train and then run backwards to complete the run to San Jose, running tender first. Los Gatos had a small freight shed and platform that brought some additional activity. Pacific number 2453 has train 191 today in front of the Bank of America. (2453) is about to leave town running tender first. Leaving town to take the line to Vasona Junction and then to San Jose will complete the trip. This train is passing by one of the many packing plants that added to freight traffic here. The Los Gatos to San Jose leg was only 8.9 miles long. On the way to the endpoint at San Jose was a small station at Campbell, California. The 484 Northerns, built for the SP daylight trains, were easily identified at a distance when they were actively pulling scheduled passenger trains. They started running on March 21st, 1937. This southbound train is number 98. It started at 8 a.m. in San Francisco at the 3rd and Townsend station. It runs by without stopping at Castroville at 11:31 a.m. So on the timetable here is Castroville at 107 miles. The Los Angeles Union Station is the last stop on the run at 470 miles. So 98 was the morning daylight south, with the northbound morning daylight as train number 99. The SP had noon daylights too until canceled in 1949. This is a fan trip a little north of San Luis Obispo. An all-black Northern up front is probably a wartime-built GS model. This fan trip highlighted things a passenger would see on the northbound daylight. The daylight would take 8 hours and 45 minutes to travel the 470 miles. That's averaging 53.7 miles per hour. After the retirement of steam, the daylights were diesel-powered. Here, Train 98 through San Jose is led by an EMD E9 unit, number 6048. It was one of 9 built in 1954 for the SP. Let's take a 1958 brief fan trip to Watsonville on an SP GS6 class Northern in non-daylight colors. The GS6 class 1943 built engines were nicknamed the War Babies. Notice the War production board only allowed a single centered headlight on the GS6s. The purpose of this run was a suntan special trip to Santa Cruz. SP 4460 pulled this train from San Francisco down to Watsonville, where diesels took the train the rest of the way to Santa Cruz on the branch line's lighter weight rail. Here's a run by at Burlingame. Arriving at Watsonville after traveling 97 miles, the fan trip passengers waited for the diesels to take over for the rest of the run to Santa Cruz. During all the power switching moves, the fans could take in all the steam power assigned there for the many companies involved in packing and processing of fruit and vegetable products. During World War II, the U.S. government decided what new locomotive power railroads could order due to managed resources by the War Production Board. At first, the board rejected a request for these handsome GS6 class engines. They seemed too much like glamorous passenger locomotives, so the SP explained that GS really means General Service and not Golden State. That and deleting the glamorous side skirts and skyline casing, plus the daylight paint, paved the way for another 10-unit order. SP 4460 made a number of fan trips, and it became the last running steam engine on the system by October 1958. Today, 4460 resides at the St. Louis, Missouri Museum of Transportation as a non-operating display. SP passenger timetables showed trains on the Shasta route, and the overland route is having milepost 0 in San Francisco, even though the trains were actually boarded 4 miles to the east in Oakland's train sheds at the Oakland Mole. The SP had a fleet of ferry boats that ran between San Francisco's ferry building to their passenger train connections in Oakland. The San Francisco Bay created both opportunities and obstacles. Before any bridges, the entire East Bay and the San Francisco Peninsula relied on ferry boats from numerous companies for commuting to jobs or just trips for pleasure and visiting friends and relatives. By World War II, the Bay Bridge made most ferries less attractive than taking the bridge unit electric trains or just driving over the bridge in a private automobile. Most people today might not know that the lower deck on the Bay Bridge had tracks for these cross-bay electric trains. It meant that the upper deck had autos running in both directions, separated only by a painted white line. The Bridge Authority couldn't wait to get these trains off the bridge and have auto traffic separated in direction by using the upper and lower deck. That finally happened by 1958. All during those years until 1958, the SP ran its own ferry service across the bay just to support its passengers holding train tickets. This ferry, the Eureka, was first owned by SP subsidiary, the Northwestern Pacific Railroad, until 1950, when it was transferred to the SP. This trip is bringing passengers that arrived by train in Oakland to the San Francisco Ferry Building. This ferry had a steam-powered walking beam engine to power it. You can see part of it rocking back and forth just behind the black smokestack. These ferries were double-ended with controls at both ends to eliminate turning the boat around. Before the Bay Bridge, millions of people crossed every year on ferry boats that were owned by a number of companies. Many of the ferry boats were owned by the Key System Electric Train Operation and the Southern Pacific Red Electric trains for general local commuting by workers and shoppers across the bay. Into the night you could hear their sounds as the fog rolled in. The ferry boat named Berkeley dates from 1898, and it ran until the end in 1958. It is now a surviving museum ship in San Diego. The San Francisco Ferry Building was opened in 1898. By 1939, the SP's ferries had to run under the bridge to head to the Oakland Mole ferry slips. Ferry boats connecting to the Northwestern Pacific, Santa Fe, and Western Pacific once used this facility. The Key System electric trains had their own Oakland Pier that ran their ferries to the San Francisco Ferry Building. This was a hot spot for cross-bay traffic until the Bay Bridge diminished its importance. This building was very well built. It readily survived all of the great earthquakes of 1906 and even 1989. The four giant clocks still work today. They are around 22 feet in diameter. The tower resembles an elaborate wedding cake, suitable for royalty. We are looking over the stern of an SP ferry and heading to Oakland. To the left of the screen is a large SP sign in the skyline. It marks the area where the SP had its large headquarters building, Milepost 0. Inside this ferry, they are preparing things for a crowd they will pick up from an SP train about to arrive in Oakland. Most ferries like this could easily handle 1,000 or more people and their baggage. Mail was also transported across the bay on these vessels. As we pan across the carved wood and stained glass decorations, you might notice an early poster for SP's piggyback service. We will reach the cavernous train shed in Oakland and see an amazing level of activity. SP's timetable for trains using the Oakland Mole showed this water leg of the 4-mile trip as the beginning of a ticketed trip. Passengers leaving Oakland to take trains over Donner Pass or into the Pacific Northwest, for example, show Oakland as Milepost 4. Here we can see the Bay Bridge projecting out of a tunnel on Yerba Buena Island. These are views of the original bridge construction that has recently been replaced with an entirely new design. We are nearing the SP's ferry slips. The tall concrete structures in the distant center are grain storage silos at the old Albers grain mill. Bear in mind that nearly everything you will see here has vanished without any trace. We are about to tie up in our slip and leave the ferry to enter the large train shed. This is the east side of the train shed. The Bay Bridge, east of Yerba Buena Island, is in the distance. If you look where the two black water towers are, you will see a string of green Railway Express cars. The REA was long ago an express package handler that was used by all the railroads. Here we find a waiting extra train, indicated by the X in the locomotive number boards. This is another fan trip train. This is Train 102, known as the City of San Francisco, to head east over Donner Pass and continue to Ogden, Utah. There, a connection with the Union Pacific will bring the train to Council Bluffs, Iowa. From there, it will be in Chicago by using the Chicago and Northwestern line. If all goes well, the trip will take under 40 hours to complete. The next scene is the same SP train on another day, a bit more east. The WP shared the SP's Oakland Mole until 1958. The small group of SP 060 switchers here shuttled passenger cars back and forth between the Mole and the coach yard facilities, where they were cleaned and returned to perfect order for the next group of trains. Another 060 passes in front of the large Albers mill. This mill had docks for grain ships on the other side of the building. Here's a close-up of 1229 bringing a mail and express baggage car for the next City of San Francisco, or possibly the Overland train. These cars were painted in Union Pacific compatible colors, since the City and the Overland were jointly operated by the Union Pacific with a connection at Ogden, Utah. Here is a view of mail, baggage, and express cars that were being prepared and stored. The numerous local passenger and mail trains to Sacramento typically use the older heavyweight coaches and other cars seen lined up here. We'll see these trains later on out on the main line. The train indicators, numbered 224, is the SP train called the Senator. This exceptionally long Senator seems to have a fan trip section tacked onto it as well. Train 27 is the westbound San Francisco Overland, on the last leg of its trip from Ogden and into the Oakland train shed. These cars look unusually grimy. They didn't start out that way. They must have experienced some foul weather on their trip. Next is a cab forward pulling a freight train through a switch. Watch the fireman's side for a guy nearly losing a leg on a short switch stand as he jumps off a swiftly moving train. This is 4443. It seems to be a little down on its luck. After years of pulling glamour trains, it is now reduced to pulling freight duty in fading paint. But don't worry, you will see its rejuvenation for pulling fan trip trains later on. Next is Train 12, the northbound Cascade that was streamlined in 1950. It was a night train so that you would spend most of your time sleeping on the way to Portland, Oregon. The cars are in lark two-tone gray, but the Alco PA power is in daylight colors. It makes one wonder how those PAs would have looked in lark colors as well. Notice the wooden track ramp to the right. This area once had electric interurban trains sharing the area that used a number of these ramps. The ramps brought electric interurban red trains to the upper level of the SP's 16th Street station until the red trains were eliminated in 1941 and many of the ramps were removed. By this 1950s scene, only the ground level tracks were used. This is the location of the station. Today the tracks are gone, and there's a tangle of elevated freeways where we saw the Cascade. The station was closed after a 1989 earthquake. It has been under restoration after years of decline. This is a local train, Train 248, the El Dorado, 92 miles to Sacramento. Even these local trains could be ticketed for originating their ride from San Francisco and using the SP's ferries to the Oakland Mole. We're going to take the SP main line that skims along the bay's coastline. We'll see lots of trains and the amazing industrial part of the East Bay that is mostly gone now. This is the Shasta Daylight. These EMD E7s powered the train until the SP thought that the Alco PA diesels would handle the mountainous grades in Northern California and Southern Oregon better than the E7s. These Shasta Daylight cars were a bit different with their larger passenger car windows on some cars. Another local to Sacramento approaches. It was called the Statesman. Since Sacramento is the state capital, these locals used a number of governmental style names, such as the Senator and the Statesman. A cab forward freight has 3 livestock cars and an interesting mix of other cars. This location had a steel plant. This switcher spots a Linde industrial gas car on a siding. The car in tow may have gases associated with heat treating or flame hardening metals. By 1958, SP decided to paint every diesel locomotive in this scarlet and gray color scheme. SP had several thousand locomotives to repaint. Some were retired before having new paint. Around the 1960s time frame, the various color schemes of passenger cars began to be intermixed, but it might have sent the wrong message to the public. But it did make things a little bit more efficient and flexible. Some of these yellow cars here were from the Union Pacific and the Milwaukee Road. Another plan was started to repaint every passenger car eventually in silver with a red band above the windows as a common standard. So here we have it, the night train of the Northwest, the Cascade. It has newly scarlet and gray painted Alco PAs on the point. The baggage cars are now the 1959 economy type, and all the passenger cars are painted in the common standard colors, silver and red. Moving ahead down the line, but a mere 6 years earlier, is a secondary status train with all the old heavyweight cars from the Roaring '20s. Here the SP crosses under the Santa Fe overpass, leading to Santa Fe's yard. This 1921-built Heavy Pacific was preserved and rebuilt for operation in time for the 1999 Sacramento Rail Fair. Lately, 2467 is on display at the Sacramento Rail Museum. The next brief segment is from Richmond, California. Richmond is known for major industries. During World War II, it built 747 ships in Kaiser's shipyards. Into the 1950s, it had a large Ford assembly plant, as well as many refineries to employ workers. The first diesels that SP acquired were mostly Alco diesel switchers. Diesels like this 1,000 horsepower Alco S2 proved their value to operations and cost savings. A local mail train heads compass south toward the Oakland Pier. Some of the mail might be headed to San Francisco by an SP ferry. Train 244 is next with an Oakland to Sacramento train. One last train is number 102, the famous City of San Francisco, that left the Oakland Pier at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time. It'll reach Ogden, Utah by 9:40 a.m. Mountain Time. Giant was named after an explosive powder company. There were several companies around here in that business. We'll see a number of freight trains with a wealth of fallen flag boxcars. Even though they were built in the 1920s, a number of boxcars that were built of composite wood and steel are still in use in the 1950s era. Next is Crockett, California. This was the location of the Carquinez Highway Bridge that replaced ferry boats that made the crossing before 1927 when the original bridge was opened. The large collection of structures to the left form the C&H sugar plant, C&H standing for California and Hawaii. The water side of the plant received ships bringing in material, notably sugarcane, grown in Hawaii. Crockett had a station stop for local trains from Oakland to Sacramento and even the San Joaquin Daylight. Back down on the ground, a few freights run by. A bit down the line is a train loaded with ice bunker refrigerator cars. With the exception of one Union Pacific boxcar, every boxcar on this local is from a railroad that no longer exists. Next, we'll see another SP region that has been long neglected. Prepare for some great scenery. This section will be about the Northwestern Pacific Railroad, or NWP, to the north of San Francisco's peninsula. The remoteness and beauty over vast sections of its main line is compelling. Much of its revenue came from forest products, which meant that many of the sections were only accessible by tracks, a few dirt roads, and hiking trails we will visit. The principal main line began in Tiburon and nearby Sausalito, both making contact with the San Francisco Bay. The south end had passenger and freight ferry and barge connections to numerous places in the Greater Bay Area. Passengers landed here and freight this location. This ferry was one originally built for the NWP. It was the best way to hop up to the NWP at Sausalito from the San Francisco Peninsula. The Eureka had its start on the Northwestern Pacific Railroad, known at first on the NWP as the ferry Ukiah. It was actually built in Tiburon by local ship workers. In service, it ran across the bay north to Sausalito in Marin County. By 1950, it was transferred to the SP for its passenger service to the Oakland Mole. Now we are back in San Francisco for a few moments to see a supporting cast member, the State Belt Railroad. The ferry building was a place where the State Belt and two streetcar lines all shared some Embarcadero street space. A passenger demonstrates his style of hopping off a white front car while in motion. Here we see it at work in front of the ferry building alongside the Muni and Whitefront streetcars. From the air we see turning loops that serve the Muni and Whitefront streetcars, while several boxcars are being handled by the State Belt Railroad. This is another fan trip with some borrowed SP passenger cars touring the Beltline. Nearby this spot, the ferry Eureka, known as the world's largest wood-hulled ferry, is currently there as an exhibit, along with other historic ships. This is San Francisco State Belt number 25. It is one of 6 Alto S2 diesels that they owned. The time is around 1955. The State Belt Railroad supported local switching for all the rail barge traffic and business sidings along the shoreline, roughly from the Presidio down to China Basin in the industrial area. The State Belt Line had shoreline tracks that managed waterfront freight traffic to and from ship, ferry, and rail barges along the waterfront. The Beltline worked these freight cars to a number of nearby industries. As industries moved elsewhere and off the peninsula, this type of freight traffic dwindled into almost nothing. The Golden Gate Bridge to Marin County and the Bay Bridge to Oakland, as well as more privately owned autos, would bring an end to much of the ferry traffic by the late 1930s. The NWP started with a patchwork of narrow and standard gauge steam lines, traceable back to 1869. This was all a very underdeveloped area. By 1907, control of numerous independent lines was gained by the Southern Pacific along with the Santa Fe Railroad. Electrification of some lines started in 1904 using wooden electrified cars, with more modern steel electric trains by 1929. The SP bought out the Santa Fe interests also by 1929. The NWP became a wholly owned subsidiary of Southern Pacific. These electric lines used an outside third rail to deliver electricity to these cars, a decision that preceded SP's involvement. Other SP electric lines used pantographs or trolley poles to provide power from overhead wiring. Conversion to the other means meant stringing wire and installing thousands of poles. Poles and wires were considered unsightly by many city officials back then. Third rail is dangerous, even lethal to curious children and pets. You can't just post warning signs to make that risk go away. Trains like 1 and 2 were replaced with self-powered brill cars to cut costs during the Depression. These early diesel electrics were used on the day trains 1 and 2 between Sausalito to Ukiah and 5 and 6 between Sausalito and Eureka. They could pull a trailing coach when needed. Under steam power, trains 3 and 4 were night trains with a sleeping car during this time. A few passenger and steam trains continued to serve for a lot longer. Listed in the 1947 SP timetable is train number 4 from San Francisco, 284 miles compass north to Eureka, California. The first 17 miles was by Pacific Greyhound Line bus from San Francisco to San Rafael in those days. This train is a special fan trip, using the exact same equipment, so it picked a better time for light here. The first car is a Railway Post Office car, or RPO. This train seems to be an all-mail and express train, with just a pair of rider coaches on the end. By the end of World War II, there were only 2 scheduled passenger trains, trains 3 and 4. Both trains featured departure in the evening and arrival in the early next morning between the endpoints of San Rafael and Eureka. That was a good arrangement for business travelers. This is where the San Rafael to Eureka line has a junction to the branch to Shellville with its interchange connection to the Southern Pacific. From Ignacio, we'll run to Petaluma. This station on the right is currently used by the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit. Petaluma was a Coast Miwok tribal name for hillside range. The SP controlled the half from Willits to the south. The Santa Fe operated the north half from Willits to Eureka, but the Santa Fe gave up involvement in 1929 by selling their share to the SP. Even though the railroad is called the NWP, the northwestern part of the name is one word, no space between the words north and western. Here our excursion train picks up a helper on the point. Between the 17 miles from Ukiah to Ridge, the climb was from 610 to 1,913 feet. About the only way they could fully pack a train was on special excursions put on by organizations such as the Railroad and Locomotive Historical Society and others. The line had 40 tunnels and countless bridges and trestles. The scenery on the way to Willits becomes like a theme park ride of natural beauty. Reaching Willits at around milepost 140 was the NWP's connection to the California Western and a rich source of their lumber traffic. The yard here was always very busy in this steam era just after World War II, with lumber needed in huge quantities to supply the post-war suburban housing boom in all parts of California. The California Western Line ran for 40 miles from Willits to Fort Bragg on the Pacific coast. It had lumber as most of its revenue back then. It replaced many schooners that braved the Pacific Ocean coastline with lumber loads to bring down to cities to the south. It looks like our 1950 excursion train will need a pair of California Western locomotives to forward these passenger cars to Fort Bragg. This pair of engines will face some grades over 3% and lots of curves ahead. The California Western has become famous for its skunk train tourist rides in various rail cars. These were originally bought for all the people that needed transportation around this territory for business, acquiring supplies and work-related travel from some very remote places known more for logging and great scenery than much else. We'll leave Willits and jump far to the north and work our way back south to highlight a few scenes that will portray an earlier time. This location is around 2 miles south of Eureka, California. By 1955, SP President D.J. Russell really wanted to drop all passenger service on the NWP, moving freight only, especially lumber. That was his goal, to keep the line profitable. This is next to Humboldt Bay. Off to our left and over the water is a jetty with a Coast Guard station. Lolita once had its own small station as a flag stop. AY is formed here at Alton from an abandoned branch line that ended at a gravel pit. About halfway to the pit is a rural community of Carlotta, where a rusting steel trestle crosses Yeager Creek. There was logging traffic here at one time by Pacific Lumber Company to keep this branch line busy. The station is gone, and all that remains are a few patches of track not yet engulfed in underbrush. Once the power is back on the front, we cross the Van Dusen River that flows into Humboldt Bay on the way to the Pacific Ocean. That's the Excursion Safety Committee cooling their heels. From now on, the tracks will follow the Eel River that at times brought grief to the NWP and the people scattered along the line. Today, many points along the Eel River have places with spans of rail hanging in midair over washouts and spans of rail covered by landslides. This is South Fork near Tunnel 37. This was once considered as a stopping point for passenger trains, with the bus completing the trip up to Eureka. That never happened. The 1964 floods wrecked a lot of track and some bridges. This type of trouble plagued the NWP in varying levels over the entire time of its existence. A closure of track anywhere on the line pinched off all revenue until it was all repaired. Island Mountain is where trains heading south pop out of a tunnel portal and then roll over the Eel River on a bridge. The tunnel is over 4,300 feet long. In September 1978, a tunnel fire started. Due to internal timber bracing, it burned for about 2 weeks. It took a year to fix the tunnel damage to a safe level. Meanwhile, the lumber companies found other means of moving their products south on the highways that had been built suitable for heavy trucks over the years. That lumber traffic would never be recaptured. Right around the bend is a workers' camp. Back in these days, passengers and railfans could experience this thrilling ride into places that only the hardiest of railroad workers could live in their isolated communities. Whatever they needed came by rail. This is the turntable here. All that's left are a few rusting freight cars and tracks twisted and hanging in the air around several washouts. Nature is slowly reclaiming its own territory back. We are about 20 miles north of Willits now, and we'll dash ahead in time to the diesel-era passenger service on this line that came in the 1950s. Starting in 1952, diesels were rapidly replacing steam on freight trains. That was done by 1953. After steam ended on the NWP, the passenger trains 3 and 4, known as the Redwood, had SD7 diesels that were used with upgraded lightweight passenger cars. Later in 1958, the more economical Bud car, number 10, was used until 1971. Let's follow SD7 5328 and others around for a bit. two end marker lights were being replaced in this era by a single red blinking light in the 1950s on passenger trains and on cabooses. Notice the spark arresters on the two exhaust stacks. On another day, a southbound train emerges from Tunnel 27 to approach the rail worker community at Island Mountain. It looks like a scheduled number 3 train with some chartered fan trip cars added on. This is one last look at the living quarters here at Island Mountain. This is a train number 3 approaching Willits Station. The scene was apparently shot from the top of a freight car. Now back to San Rafael with a long train number 4 needing a pair of passenger SD7 diesels on this northbound trip that brings some new scenes of around 1958. This line featured lots of scenery through wild and undeveloped countryside that back in the past was inaccessible but for these rails. Coming up is the famous trestle at Scotia Bluffs. To the left of the camera operator, and therefore out of sight, is the large Pacific Lumber Sawmill complex and the company town of mill workers and their families living there. The mill in town is still there, but since trains have stopped running here, these tracks and their supports are nearly out of sight from underbrush taking over. Tiburon was the ferry slip and yard for freight traffic. Behind the SD7 diesel, the 2-story building was the freight office. It's the only remaining building here, now used as a museum. The lone 1908 built steam engine number 112 still exists, but it resides at the Sacramento State Railroad Museum. She's a 460 in perfect cosmetic condition. This is the Corte Madera trestle and drawbridge over a waterway. Story has it that the opening and closing of the drawbridge was by hand cranking and lots of human muscle. This fan trip makes a stop at San Rafael. Our 1947 SP passenger train public timetable shows this is where San Francisco passengers got off of a Greyhound bus to actually board trains. The ferry rides to Sausalito for boarding trains had already ended on the NWP. The Golden Gate Bridge had made this shift possible. Next is another look at the Sausalito area in some nicer weather with SP's first diesel, dating from 1939. We'll follow this historic SP diesel while it picks up and drops off a few flat cars in Sausalito, California, and then runs north through some now unused tracks of the old NWP. In these early 1960s scenes, most of the freight cars to and from the NWP were routed through the SP's Shelville Junction and not rail barges. So the freight traffic down to Sausalito was just a trickle, easily handled by a simple 600 horsepower early switcher. The way you can discern an SW1 from later EMD switchers is the toolbox bulging out in front of the radiator. We suspect that the three guys in the Chevrolet rail car are heading to the Corte Madera drawbridge to crank the thing back down for the SW1 to cross. Sausalito had about 10 different spellings on deeds, maps, and documents, and even names used by post offices, until 1887, when the U.S. Post Office made it a settled issue using the present-day spelling we now know. Trains pop out of a 2,100-foot-long tunnel in a residential neighborhood. You can just make out the concrete tunnel portal in the background behind the caboose. At a place called Baltimore Park, the train cuts to the right on a bypass that will take the train to the place where it crosses under Highway 101 again. If you retraced this line today, you would be amazed about how built up all these locations have become. Next, number 1000 crosses over the same trestle just past the drawbridge and water channel. When NWP switched its remaining scheduled passenger service to the self-propelled number 10 RDC car, it only operated between Willits and Eureka 3 times a week. The number 10 originally had control cabs at both ends before it hit a truck in a grade crossing incident. It was repaired with just blank sheet metal. D.J. Russell was the SP president from 1964 to 72. Eliminating the financial losses on passenger trains that he had pursued as vice president from 1952 to 64 was nearly complete by this time, at least on the NWP. So here we are, some final views on the NWP of this tri-weekly adventure that had no equal in California.